it was so funny yesterday. Like I went back on Twitter, and I went back and followed like Billy Lucci, and you start to see the A&M fans and the Texas fans start to go back and forth at one another again. And it's like the rivalry is starting to almost be rekindled a little bit, just as talks about this thing are starting. The hate is beginning to flow. And I didn't realize how much I missed it. Like I said, I went and followed all the old Aggie reporters that I haven't been paying attention to in so long, just to hear whatever remarks that, they had. Just let that hate just flow into my body, man. It's been a rad 18 hours or so for sure.
No, Alex, I'm with you. I don't know that I knew how much I missed the Aggies to some degree until yesterday. The talking points turned. You know what I mean? It's been the exact same conversation for the last near decade. We're in the SEC and you guys aren't, and it's just I've been bored of that. But right. Yesterday did not bore me. Yesterday I was like, Billy, come give me a hug. It's been too long since you and I've been, had it been in a conference, covering a conference together. It's been a decade. Let's just stir some shit up, Billy. Let's just do it. Come on, for old time's sake. And we might be back in a world where the things that I say and the things that Suchomel writes and Anwar, we may have those eyeballs on us again, the way that it used to be. And that was kind of fun back then. I realized how much I think I've missed the Aggies on some level yesterday, when the spite and the hate and we want to be the only SEC team from the state of Texas. It was all like, oh, we've been missing this. I'm okay with it. A couple of things. I think almost the most important thing, Jason, from my perspective on this story, it really is an exclamation mark on this notion that the hierarchy at the University of Texas is about something completely different than they were 10 years ago when this first set of realignment occurred. You wonder if the LTIF and the Hartzells and the Del Contes had been in place a decade ago, if Texas... I don't know that Texas stays put. I don't know. Maybe they don't go to the SEC. Maybe it's something else. But this group that's in charge right now cares a lot about athletics. And, the very first thing that came out of anybody's mouth yesterday from the Texas official side of things, when I reached out for comments on the story, was this takes away A&M's biggest advantage in recruiting. And I was like, oh, so that's where everybody's heads are. But, this is a hierarchy at Texas now that places athletics at a very high level. I don't know how high of a level, right? I don't want to say it's higher than academics. Maybe that's not fair.
They'd never admit that publicly if that was true. They'd be
but they're obsessed with athletics.
Well, they follow it we've had this conversation, and they follow it like the Orangebloods subscribers do. I mean, they know recruiting. They know the stories with the Quinn Ewers stuff. I mean, they know the ins and outs.
Many of them are Orangebloods subscribers.
Probably so. Yeah, you're right, Alex. So, that, I kind of chimed in on that thread. I mean, this move would not have happened under the previous, I guess, leadership, even two athletic directors, if you will. I mean, they were so worried about the Longhorn network, and, it was all about the money of that. But, yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Ketch. This new leadership, this solidifies everything we had heard and everything we thought, that this new leadership, they care about sports and they care about football a lot. And, if this is what's best for the football program, obviously it's got to make financial sense, but it will. And even from a recruiting perspective, it's crazy to think that recruiting could be I'm not saying it's the driving force in this move, but it's a contributing factor to this potential move. It makes perfect sense, but it's still crazy for me to think about that the leadership, the school president and the athletic director and the people who matter are factoring the recruiting impact into this decision. But hey, I think there's absolute truth to that. And it is a telltale sign that this leadership is absolutely being successful in sports, in athletics, in football is paramount to this group.
Alex, it's interesting to piggyback on what Jason's talking about from the recruiting standpoint. When Sarkisian is hired, I think the thought would have been that they thought that was going to change immediately. And in a way it did. I mean, Texas is receiving consideration from big time guys where if Herman were still here, maybe they're not getting visits. So there are layers to this, but Texas not being able to close the deal with a guy like Kelvin Banks, for instance, he goes to Oregon. It feels like it's not an accident that this thing, the rubber's meeting the road on this Texas and OU thing to the SEC on the heels of Texas, I think, taking a few lumps in recruiting and realizing changing the coaches didn't change everything. And they want to be in the cool kids club and they're tired of, and I don't think they want to let another half decade go by where there's a trickle, an accumulation effect of what it means to not be in the cool kids club. This is a lot about money, but this is also really a lot about neutralizing the issues that the football program specifically has, not the basketball program, not the baseball program. Texas just won the Director's Cup. So they've had as a university as much success as they've ever had at one time together. But this is about football mattering more than anything and everything combined and eliminating these issues that the football program deal with on a daily basis.
Well, and Ketch, I mean, far be it from me to, disagree with anything you said. I know that you've been in constant conversations with people, or, whatever insight you've imparted and whatever you just said is stuff that I would take to the banks because I know the types of people you've been talking to. But I would say I find it a little bit I find it a little bit surprising to think that like the Kelvin Banks stuff and the weekend of the 4th of July, going into the stuff that happened the 4th of July weekend, Cameron Williams, all those, I would have thought that something like this would have had to have been, I'm not sure that those losses are a direct impetus for it because it feels like something like this might have had to have been maybe had the wheels in motion a little bit earlier than that. Then again, you could have information that I don't have. My just biggest takeaway to what you just asked though, is it feels like what's changed the most with this stuff is just the NIL stuff. And maybe Texas, maybe if the NIL was allowed to level the playing field between how you can recruit these guys and the kinds of methods and tactics that you have to employ to be competitive in the SEC aren't necessarily illegal anymore. Like there's all kinds of things that Texas can do and Texas can offer these players and Texas can talk to these players about once we get everything ironed out with NIL, what exactly is legal to say, what exactly is legal to do, what is it that you can do to at least pitch things in a certain way to, if not to give the young prospect a deal, or say you're going to broker some sort of deal, at least be able to pitch like, look, we got this guy on the hook. We got this guy on the hook. He's definitely, this guy always sponsors the new freshman. There's going to be a million different ways that you could probably do this and be able to compete with the SEC that used to just have the bag of money from Chick-fil-A. To me, it feels like right. To me, it feels like, the timing here for a school like Texas, that's always, at least from the public facing side, has been a school that says, we don't take part in that, we're going to take the high road. Well, this is basically, to me, it's an admission of saying like, well, yeah, of course it's better football over there in the SEC. Up till this point, though, we didn't feel like it was something that we could compete with just based on how we want to operate as a university.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I didn't want to suggest that the Kelvin Banks recruitment, for example, had somehow played a role in this. It's just a continued byproduct of this thing that they deal with. And, they have now, I think, known for a few months. This isn't, we were talking before Banks made his decision that, man, this is a little tougher than I think Texas administration would have thought. They hired this great recruiting staff, and it just, you could even go back to when maybe even Evan Stewart decommitted, and it was like, okay, these same themes keep popping up. Right. And, I think that there's just the timing of this is really interesting.